Hi, good evening. Some people make fun of me because I always present my guests as being prominent, but this time I really do believe that I have a prominent guest, a university professor, a historian, a Christian, a Catholic. But as we discussed before we started this stream, I will surprise my guest with reading the expose from Wikipedia about her.
And truly famous, right? I've got a Wikipedia page. Hi.
Yeah. She is famous, and she also... You're not directly presented as white supremacist as Stefan Molyneux, which is also preposterous to be honest, but they're trying to imply. So let me read it. Rachel Fulton Brown is an American academic, earning a PhD in '94 from Columbia University. She's a professor of medieval history at the University of Chicago. Fulton Brown has authored a variety of texts on the topic of Christian studies in the Middle Ages, and 2019 book chronicling her friendship with far-right figure Milo Yiannopoulos through Yiannopoulos' publishing imprint Dangerous Books. Fulton Brown has also written for Breitbart, also another far-right media, in December, full of Jews. By the way, in December 2020, United States President Donald Trump announced an intent to appoint Fulton Brown to the Cultural Property Advisory Committee, which the official White House website described as a key administration post. Comments and blog entries published by Fulton Brown gained notable attention in academia as part of a broader discussion regarding white nationalism and medieval studies. I didn't hear about this. I haven't heard it till yet, right now. As described by the New York Times, the idea of medieval studies as a haven for white nationalist ideas gained ground when Rachel Fulton Brown, an associate professor of medieval history at the University of Chicago, began feuding with Dorothy Kim, an assistant professor of medieval English literature at Brandeis, after Dr. Kim, writing on Facebook, highlighted an old blog post of Dr. Fulton Brown's titled "3 Cheers for White Men," calling it an example of medievalists upholding white supremacy. The article caused a furor as scholars accused colleagues of providing screenshots of private Facebook conversations and surreptitious recordings of conference sessions to Mr. Yiannopoulos. Okay, and they also implied that you're somehow connected to Vox Day, who is also supposedly far-right activist, and so forth and so forth. How are you satisfied with your Wikipedia entry, Dr. Brown?
In what sense? I mean, I'm satisfied that they found me, and I'm very satisfied that in the external links, they give you links to my academic homepage, which will tell you my version of who I am and what I believe. I mean, it is true. I wrote a book, Milo Chronicles, about Milo. That's taken from my blog, Fencing Bear at Prayer. It's true. I'm friends with Vox Day. I do videos on his unauthorized TV platform about medieval history. The series for that one is mainly on early medieval history. And I have an ongoing series on the works of J.R.R. Tolkien called The Forge of Tolkien. I'm almost 40 episodes in on that one. So that's been my main video content for this past year. Which bits don't I agree with? I mean, the thing is, by now, being called a white supremacist just means, you're Christian and you would rather have a nation than a world government. I oppose the Tower of Babel. Does that make me a white supremacist? No, as anybody who's actually read my work on Milo, or in my scholarship on devotion to Christ and the Virgin Mary, or has listened to my videos at all, I mean, the main thing I am interested in is the history of Christianity, the celebration of creativity, art, beauty, goodness, truth, laughter, joy. I mean, all of the and it's very interesting to me that now we label all of these things white supremacist. I mean, I think that my friends who are, you know, in other parts of the Catholic Church or in Orthodoxy or in Christianity around the world would probably share my vision of, you know, the joy of Christ. So exactly what does this mean? I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm actually happy to be on Vox's platform at Unauthorized. It's, you know, I'm able to celebrate the problem of making and joy and storytelling through my Forge of Tolkien series. And, you know, we're mainly Christians interested in art and creativity.
By the way, did you succeed with Owen Benjamin, or is he still a heretic?
Well, I think these things take time. I mean, you know, we had a little discussion with him, and E. Michael Jones and Patrick Hoffman and I, at Milo's invitation, tried to, you know, share with him our vision of the Trinity, and he hasn't really gotten back to us yet in detail about it. So we're waiting.
Yeah, I'm waiting too. I'm waiting.
We pray for Owen, because the thing is, Owen loves. I mean, Owen is obviously also an unauthorized with me, and Owen and I share, you know, a joy of storytelling and of looking for patterns and significance and meaning. So I'm confident in the long run he'll understand the Trinity.
I judging just by myself. Before I considered myself a Christian, and before I started being friends with Christians, first with Protestants, and then later on I returned to the church of my baptism, Catholic Church. I would not have known anything about J.R.R. Tolkien besides the fact that he was an author of Lord of the Rings. How is it amongst the so-called normal people, non-Christians in America, for example, and around the world, when it goes about J.R.R. Tolkien and his Christianity and his Catholicism, and Catholicism in his works?
Well, most Catholics obviously know that Tolkien is Catholic and writing from a Catholic sacramental perspective, right? And in my Forge of Tolkien series, the videos, I'm only at video 38 or so, and I suspect it's going to take me a few more years to work through all of the mysteries that he shows. But Tolkien has a very rich understanding of, you know, the mystery of creation, and therefore what he calls artistic work is subcreation, right? We're made in the image and likeness of our Creator, and his stories are all about that desire to praise God through our creativity. I think people who are not, you know, come from the outside culture, the mainstream secular culture, and see Tolkien, respond to that, you know, love of art and music and you know, making things, stories, poetry, and they won't necessarily realize that the reason it has the power that it does is because of his Catholic perspective. But so to me, that he's like the best of all Christian apologists, in the sense that he's showing you the mystery from within before telling you, oh, it's Christian, right? That you don't have to stick the label on it to first experience the sort of exploration of fairy from within. And then what I try to do in my class that I teach on campus, show, you know, gradually, once you get to the sense of, okay, so he thinks about free will, he thinks about the problems of sin and how it cuts us off from worship of God, how, you know, in fact, the temptation that Sauron gives when he hands out all the rings is of dominating other wills. And so it's, you know, it's very theologically rich construction. Once I walk people through all of that, and then say, well, okay, as far as Tolkien understands, this is the core of understanding Christianity. Now, he does it all, you know, historically speaking, prior to Christ, right? Prior to the incarnation. So he doesn't have the salvation within his stories, but he's setting you up for the reason that we need it, right? That is what I try to do in my own, scholarship and storytelling and writing. It's like, I want to show you from within first, and then you'll realize that maybe what you thought, that the white supremacy problem is similar, right? It's like, oh, we all of us, you, me, Stefan Molyneux. Well, Stefan Molyneux's still an atheist. We got to work on him. Maybe we should do an intervention with Stefan. That you worry about what Christianity means, and you're sort of turned off by the label. If we can show you from within why we rejoice in Christ first, then maybe you feel less difficulty once you realize that that's what we've been talking about all along.
Why is it so hard with these hyper intellectuals, if I may say so, like Stefan Molyneux and Jordan B. Peterson? Why is it so hard for them to accept Christ and Christianity and the faith and the religion? They both started with atheism, basically, and after many years they become very friendly towards Christianity, yet they remain being atheists. They just can't say it, I believe in Jesus Christ. Why do you think?
Pride. I mean, that is, it's always the temptation for intellectuals. We want to be able to control everything with our minds. And from the, as an intellectual, what you want to do is be able to understand things and explain things fully. And for creatures to imagine that we're going to be able to explain our existence better than our maker is hubris, right? And you think about it's like, I have a dog, right? And I keep, he's new, he's a puppy, and I keep looking at him and thinking, how could you ever make a dog, right? We get robots or something like that, but these are creatures, created in living life, and there's something beyond our understanding, and they're just our pets, right? How can you imagine what it means to give birth to a human being that you have conceived in love with a member of the opposite sex, and imagine that you are somehow in control of that process, right? I think intellectuals constantly, and this is the pride of the making, right? Which is one of the things that Tolkien is very good about showing, that the elf character Feanor, he makes these gemstones, the Silmarils, that capture the light of the trees, the light of the blessed realm, and he gets very clingy to them, so that he thinks this is this thing I made. It's like Galanith is precious, only more so because Feanor actually made them. And that possessiveness that we have of our own artwork is the failure to recognize ourselves as, in fact, made, again, in the image and likeness of a maker. And the trap is always to think that we can make ourselves, right? And it's the same, it's the trap of modernity. It's the trap of science as, the sort of trust the science kind of thing, believing that Anthony Fauci or Bill Gates or somebody is in control of life itself. That's nuts, right? And I think the pride that intellectuals have, the unwillingness to surrender to that recognition of our creatureliness is the root of it. You don't want to feel like there's nothing you can't control with your head.
I made a Freudian slip before, because I said non-Christians were normal people, but
we don't really belong, right?
But
we're somehow strange and crazy to everyone, because we're going, God made us and he loves us, and that's magnificent, and everybody goes, what?
But yeah, it was a Freudian slip, but nevertheless, it's true, isn't it? It's true that being a Christian is not normal anymore in the world we live in, at least in the West. Would you say so?
Well, it was never normal in the sense that we are always, we're creatures made to be members of the kingdom of heaven, right? And so our life on earth is, I don't know. It's sort of tricky to think about it. It's like a preparation or a test. It's more an opportunity, right? To, God made us to love us and to enjoy us and so that we would enjoy him and praise him. That in our fallen state, we're cut off from that direct vision of God. So yes, insofar as we're Christians, we're always a bit out of step with the world because we don't worship the Lord of the world. We don't worship Satan. Satan kind of mad at us.
By Christians being normal people, I meant something in the sense that at least we were taught so, that our grandmothers and grandmothers and grandfathers were supposedly more religious and more inclined towards Christianity and faith and so forth. I don't know if it was ever truly like that, but at least we were taught so. Okay, there was Abigail Shapiro. I don't know if this is a joke.
It's a joke, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is, but don't.
she sure picked a.
Yeah, I wrote that Wikipedia. Hi.
What happened to C.S. Lewis and the Inklings? Why didn't they get along with Tolkien?
Well, Lewis and Tolkien were, of course, incredibly close friends for some years, or a good decade or so, and that they came to the idea of writing the fiction that they did, sort of as a shared project, right? That Lewis would write space stories and Tolkien would write a time travel story. And if you understand The Lord of the Rings is effectively a kind of time travel story, there's a lot of sort of deep currents in it about dreams and knowing different time moments and things like that. The real reason they fell out, first, Lewis became very close friends with Charles Williams, who Tolkien, I think he appreciated him. He wrote an essay. They published on fairy stories, Tolkien's great fairy story essay, in the essays presented to Charles Williams. But Charles Williams was bizarre. I have to confess, I've never finished one of his books. I've started a number of them, and they're sort of fantasy in a kind of, well, a Christian fantasy, but in a weird sense. And they always go strange at some point, and I just can't finish them. And Lewis, if you've read That Hideous Strength, if you read the Space Trilogy, right, it's like Out of the Silent Planet is very much during his friendship with Tolkien, and Ransom is the philologist character, and it's all about talking with other rational beings, Canal, that they meet on Mars, right? Pure Landra is Lewis's, rewriting of Milton's Paradise Lost, and Lewis was a great scholar of Milton, and so he's rewriting that. That Hideous Strength, which is really, if you want a blueprint for what we're living through right now, with the sort of scientists taking over the town and corrupting everybody with trying to talk to demons and have the head that speak. That all was written much more under the influence of Charles Williams. And if you feel a difference between those three stories, the last one was Lewis's sort of gesture towards a William-esque kind of character, and Tolkien I think he just found it too strange and uncomfortable. And I agree, I kind of agree with Tolkien. Williams is harder to read. And then I think they sort of drifted apart. And when Lewis fell in love and got married to Joy Davidson, right, that marriage kind of pulled him out of his older friendships as well. So it's complicated. There wasn't a sort of dramatic falling out, which is why it's so tricky to narrate.
Okay. This is a question. Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you. Clun Georgie says, and then goes on, trying to elaborate it. High IQ, that's why, no offense. When I asked before, what turns hyper-intellectuals like Stefan Molyneux and Jordan B. Peterson from Christianity? This is what Clun Georgie says, and then tries to elaborate it with, there is a very superstitious element to all three Abrahamic religions. It's a very unique, almost silly kind of superstition that tends to turn reasonable, intelligent people away from it. I don't know. I'm not sure if I understand this. Do you understand his argument?
Yes, I do, and it fails on a number of levels. My IQ is certainly just as high as Jordan Peterson's. No, it really is based. I mean, it's quite frankly based on things that Vox Dei has said about the claims that Jordan made about not being able to get into law school and not passing the test to get in. My IQ is probably higher if we're going to play that game. However, I think that I enjoy, and you can say Owen and I share similar. I think Vox, Owen and I all have around the same. Pride gets you. It doesn't matter what your IQ is. You can be very, very proud with a lower IQ. That's not the point. What high IQ gives you is the ability to see patterns, right? And what you do with that ability, whether you sort of rejoice in the worship of our Creator, or you think that gives you satanic abilities to design the world, is a feature. But the simple fact of the IQ has nothing strictly speaking to do with it.
Okay. Oswald Speng.
I suspect that won't satisfy him, but it's a red herring, is what I'd say, right? It's like there's plenty of incredibly intelligent people who have spent their lives contemplating the mysteries of theology and reality and metaphysics, and to say that only those who turn themselves to meddling and tinkering with the technology of the world are the high IQ ones. I would say they're probably not. That they're lesser ability to really appreciate the mystery.
And it would be so, if it were true, it would be so easy to describe the mechanism behind it, because it's not enough to say IQ is the mechanism. What about the IQ is it that turns you away from Christianity and religion? Okay, Clun George, says both Nietzsche and a certain Austrian painter had some very good criticisms of Christianity. It's hard to elaborate it here in the YouTube comment section. Did they, though?
He's right. This is probably not the easiest to have right now. But no, so if you want to play with the IQ game, which is also I appreciate typically tied to the racial game, you could say those with the highest IQs are the least likely to find difficulties with the mysteries of Revelation. Again, sin is not a feature of intelligence, right? Satan was incredibly intelligent, and he definitely sinned. It's the ability to be humble before your ignorance is as much a sign of intelligence as your pride in thinking that you're able to solve the world. I put it to you that I doubt very much anyone sitting here would say we have solved human existence. And it's an interesting feature of indeed the gift of our intelligence and our desire to make sense of the world, and our reason, which is a God-given gift, that we want to, right? We are drawn to and gifted with the longing to unlock all of these mysteries and to understand that is part of what we're made to be. But I really seriously doubt that anyone here will want to say we are capable of designing the perfect world, and that's always the high IQ, the high hubris temptation is to think that we can fix everything, particularly by we'll just get rid of the people that we don't like. That's not really the best answer.
What does Dr. Brown think of Rudolf Steiner? Owen Barfield was a Steinerian. The rest of the Inklings relatively Steiner-phobic.
That's a fair question, and I'm sorry I haven't really read Steiner, so that's actually a good place to start thinking about the problem. Steiner, my general sense of him is he's in that sort of stronger mystical tradition, but I can't speak properly about it. Sorry. It's like I do love Barfield a lot. And I've read Poetic Diction, and I know Barfield. If there's a really good book by Philip and Carol Zaleski on the Inklings, the foursome, including a good discussion of Barfield. But I just haven't done the reading in Steiner yet.
Before I ask you a funnier question about what Lord of the Rings character would Milo be, I'm going to ask you this a little bit harder question and a bit more provocative, maybe. Could you ask Dr. Brown what she thinks of Tolkien's philo-Semitism?
Well, yes, because famously when he was asked by the German publishers who wanted to do the translation of The Hobbit whether he had any Jewish ancestry, and he had to say, "I'm sorry, I can't claim any relationship to that people." I think he's conflicted in the way that most Christians are about how to think about Jews in relationship to Christianity. My answer for that problem is Christianity and Judaism are branches of the same ancient tradition, right? The temple tradition. And when Christ came, one branch goes off and recognizes itself as the fulfillment of the scriptures, and the other branch goes off and says, that Jesus wasn't. I am not certain that Tolkien ever properly wrestled with that. And it's interesting because I think his stories are all trying to do like the ancient tradition, right? That they are the elves and the Valar as the ancient mythologies, and the elves are somehow there before the men wake up, and that they are subject to the same kind of fall and so forth. But that they're the temptations and falls that they have fit with. I've been doing this a lot in my Tolkien, my lecture, my unauthorized videos. They fit with other ancient stories, and definitely Genesis, but things like the Book of Enoch with the fallen angels and the temptations of the technology that the fallen angels bring. What I haven't noticed in my own reading of Tolkien is any terrifically deep engagement with the actual Jewish traditions as opposed to simply the ancient Hebrew imagery. For example, I did a sort of joke lecture that you guys might be interested to look up. You look up the Latka Hamantash debate from 2014 or so. The Latka Hamantash debate on campus in Chicago is the potato pancake versus the cookie debate, right? For which one's which, the Hamantashen or the cookies, and the Lakas or the potato pancakes. And I rewrote it as rewrote the Silmarillion and the trees as the story of the debate between the cookies and the light. The cookies and the pancakes. Insofar as Tolkien's mythology is very, very Old Testament, he can feel sort of strange to Christians. But the thing is, it's actually just Christianity. I don't think he actually dealt properly with Judaism, frankly. So I think it's more he didn't want to go there than that he thought through it terrifically well. But he was certainly, despised Hitler. And considered Hitler's effect on the world very, very bad. I can't remember exactly how he said it. It's in one of the letters, and he's dismissive of Hitler.
One of the commenters asks a question: will Dr. Brown write a book on Logos and Mary?
I'm not quite sure how you mean that. If you read my Mary and the Art of Prayer, that deals with her as wisdom, right? And that's really her sort of parallel role to understanding Christ as Logos. You need to understand Mary and her capacity as the mother of wisdom. And Mary and the Art of Prayer goes in depth through the scriptural tradition that will, show you that. So maybe I've already written it.
Tell us about how Michael Hoffman and Tolkien's scholarship overlaps.
I don't know that Michael Hoffman's ever written about Tolkien. I mean, you mean in my reading? How do you mean? That's
I don't know. Jerry Garcia elaborated.
I don't know who that is. I suspect alts. I want more evidence of true names before I start answering some of these questions.
Clune George is trying to come back. There is a strong inverse correlation between IQ and religiosity. It shows a clear trend, does not mean there aren't exceptions. Take that as you will. And then Chris K goes on to tell him that the trend is true for mid-level IQ people, for midwits, but no one with IQ with an IQ above 140 does not believe in God.
Well, there you go. That's answered it. So
that's answered. Okay. You're finished.
You guys can fight that out in comics.
Okay, but about Milo, what's your relationship with Milo? And at the end, you can answer that question. That funny question. What Lord of the Rings character would he be? And of whether you have faith in his. He's trying not to be homosexual anymore.
Yes, I do have faith in it, and he's. I mean, if you actually listen to what he's strictly saying, he's practicing chastity right now, right, celibacy. That and he keeps account, and he's coming up to his 1-year anniversary on this resolution with only one slip in the year. So, I think if you're trying to the kind of practices he's engaged in, the best way to understand them, and he has talked about this, it's an addiction, right? And any of you guys who have used porn or drink or smoke or eat too many potato chips, you understand the difficulty of really changing habits that have been bound up with other kinds of I will say psychological, but psychology is a poor category for understanding the soul. Truly, it's very shallow in many ways. But that Milo understands it as a problem of fighting an addiction, and it's literally a one day at a time practice. So any of you who have also dealt with that kind of addiction will understand what he's wrestling with.
Yeah, I had that problem with carbohydrates.
That tends to be mine, right? But back when I was writing my dissertation, I was smoking, and so I do know it's like some addictions you can cut cold turkey, and it's just the best. You never go back to them. Other ones, I'm hoping for Milo, it's more like smoking than carbs. But carbs are hard. People make you birthday cakes, and you're stuck. You're trapped again.
Yeah, it comes really fast. One moment you're feeling really strong and being able to not take them in anymore, but the next moment somebody bakes you a cake.
Yes, hopefully nobody's making Milo those kind of cakes right now. But I and also the other reason I really have faith in him is that he started. It's like people make big announcements about things like I'm today I'm quitting today, right? And they stopped drinking yesterday or something like that. But he didn't say anything publicly about this for like 6 months, right? The first announcement that he had that he was keeping track of days without sodomy, he was fairly far into the count. And I do admire greatly his honesty in making it public, but I also trust that he realized it was going to be hard, and he didn't just like announce it one day and then expect everybody to believe him. And I appreciate all of us as sinners, hopefully appreciate how difficult it is truly to change our sinful behaviors, and you have to use a lot of prayer and a lot of prayer.
Are you aware of the fact of whether people in the history thought of homosexuality in the same way that we or Milo now sees it, as opposed to the mainstream that sees it as a... How does the mainstream sees the homosexuality, and why is it opposed to thinking about homosexuality as a problem?
Well, the Marquis de Sade probably, has a lot to play. I'd say Michael Jones has written a lot about this, the libido dominandi problem, that we've made our sexual sins into, character, identity markers, right? And so you're basically identifying yourself as your sin, I think. And to think that it's I think, it's I of a piece with championing adultery or fornication generally, right? Or indeed something like alcoholism or your drug abuse. If you make your sin your identity, then you are cutting yourself off from God and damaging your own soul. And it's interesting that and it's interesting that these are the bodily sins, right? Gluttony, lust, sloth. We're not even the intellectual sins like pride and envy and anger. And I always forget them. There's 7, and I always forget one when I'm listening. Which one did I just forget? That we've given ourselves over in this materialist pleasure culture to our sexual and gut sins, and told ourselves that these are what define us, rather than our being made to praise God and sing in joy. In the past, I mean, in the Middle Ages, these sins are not new, right? And one book that Milo has mentioned that he's been reading, the Book of Gomorrah that Peter Damian wrote in the 11th century. Peter identifies the sodomitical practices of the clergy at the time and say, these are sins. But what's interesting about Peter is he wasn't just about saying, sodomy is bad. He was also very committed to the kind of prayer practices include fasting, self-flagellation, which is a sort of I've written a book that includes some of this meditation in it. But he understood very well that the lust, greed, and gluttony all went together, and no one of those is any better. Gluttony is just as much a sin as sodomy. And if you look at our obesity epidemic, you can see those people are trapped as well in I think carbs are kind of self-medicating sin, and I think also the sweetness that's particularly in all the American food, and apparently now in food even more around the world, it's a drug, right? So though any of us who are overweight or addicted in some other ways to the self-medicating are part of the same problem.
What about okay, there's one part, you're homosexual and you treat it as similarly as carbs or porn, and you make it through. You're successful, but what then? Does it turn you then into a straight man or a straight woman or a heterosexual? Are you then able to have a successful, fruitful relationship with another sex? Or
that I don't know, because I don't have that level of experience with the addiction, and I'm not a man. That I think, Milo has been upfront about this too, that it's journey, it's a process. What he's working on right now is celibacy.
Okay. Oswald Spengler asks, if you ask my question, you might mention that John Waters came to Catholicism through Alcoholics Anonymous. Do you know John Waters and his story?
I don't. You'd have to tell me.
Is Dr. Brown familiar with the Catholic Irish former journalist / father of Sinead O'Connor's daughter, John Waters? So you're not.
No, I'm sorry. I do know the name, but I haven't heard about him. It makes sense that he came through Alcoholics Anonymous. The Alcoholics Anonymous has you surrender yourself to a higher power and stuff. It's a kind of confessional practice, and that people describe it as I'm not entirely sure about what the success rate that Alcoholics Anonymous claims, but that you are recognizing your sin and your failing and making amends with people. All of this seems to me to be, a powerful practice. But I think, you need Milo has a lot of other support, right? He has priests that he's talking to. He has, the reading and prayer that he's doing. This is a hard journey, but a journey out of sin is always difficult. And yet, Christ makes it possible for us. So we pray for each other. Right?
I cannot even imagine that something similar would be possible in Slovenia and not being attacked by a left-wing media or cathedral or whoever thinks instead of us in our society. That's why I asked you to if you'd be able to provide me with contact of Milo. It would be probably great for so many homosexuals in Slovenia to hear his story directly, and perhaps if you when you talk to him some other time, maybe you can persuade him to talk to me by elaborating it like this. Because
that's certainly what he sees as his mission now, is helping people out, and to say, it's like it's as difficult as giving up the gluttony and giving up the smoking and giving up all of we self-medicate ourselves with pleasure, which isn't pleasure, so much, and it is interesting it's like we had some cake this weekend and I'm feeling really guilty because it's so easy to fall back into these stupors, right? And again, if you've ever given into that kind of laziness, lust, sloth, you get it, right? This is how difficult it is. And of course with the sodomy, the homosexual practices, that is also, as Milo has now been talking about, deeply bound up with being abused as a child in some fashion, right? It's what Milo says is, overbearing mothers and absent fathers is the strongest indicator. But most, I've been reading a lot more of these stories. I mean, Milo kind of bust this open when he, had to admit into the world 4 years ago that he'd been abused by the priest. But it's the numbers of people in the homosexual lifestyle that weren't abused, is basically close to zero, right? That some form of childhood trauma is behind it, which means you're coping with something really, really, really dark in your past, and it's very hard to be able to face that and live through it.
Has Milo read the book "The Man Behind the Curtain" by E. Michael Jones, which is about Michael Voris?
Yes, but he hasn't talked directly with Michael Jones about that.
What's your stance on Church Militant and Michael Voris?
I'm not deeply familiar with them. I watched Michael's interview with Milo several years ago, and Milo has credited him with being one of the ones who really called him out at the time, right? That Milo wrote Diabolical. I did the foreword for that book back in 2018, and after that, Patrick Coffin had Milo on, and Michael Voris had him on Church Militant, and both of them, pushed Milo fairly hard on his lifestyle, and Milo has credited both of them with being, some of the most important voices in helping him.
Okay, let's go back to real culture.
This is. I mean, I'm glad you care about Milo's journey, but this is. You should talk to Milo about it.
Yeah. I asked you if we could talk also about the those statues in America and about revision of the history in America and in the West. How do you feel about it? What's your stance? Does this I will call it Black Lives Matter revision of the history of the West. If you don't agree with me to call it like that, please correct me. But what do you think about it? Does it have any sense, or is it just?
It's a familiar process, and in fact, I was on Milo's show about this time last year, and we talked about it. That iconoclasm, the sort of breaking of images, is a regular feature of certainly Western history, and it's interesting that we, have this both strong attachment to memorial statues and desire to destroy them. When Milo and I talked about it, I said, well, we've already, as far as I was concerned, lost most of the statuary that I would consider best to have in the public sphere. Where are all the crucifixes? where are all the statues of Our Lady, right? And the Protestants in the 16th century destroyed much of Europe's statuary art in particular regions, right? That it's not wrong to realize that, yes, if you break down these memorials, you're going to, in a generation or so, affect a very powerful transformation of the culture. What I've been thinking on in just recently about the destruction of our American history is it kind of it's already happened. The number of people that simply don't know our history already is quite frustrating and disturbing. But part of the reason that the caricature version that the critical race theory or the BLM is trying to promote is precisely because the previous version was also a bit of a myth, right? It's like they're battling. As far as I'm concerned, it's myths and contest rather than a real appreciation of how complicated the development of our country has been. And I mean, one of the things that I often point out, it's like you can joke about what's the most important date in the history of the United States. Well, I claim it's 1588. And do anybody listening to chat? Do you remember what happened in 1588 when the English defeated the Spanish Armada, right? Which has enormous effects on how the empires in the New World develop. And one of the ways to understand, the long-term history of North and South America is it's a battle between the English and the Spanish from, the beginning, right? In 1588, Elizabeth's pirates, Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins, managed to command the destruction of Philip II's armada, and they've been looting the Spanish treasure ships the whole time. The English, therefore, as they expand their colonies in North America, are constantly at odds with the Spanish, who are already established in Florida, already established in what's New Mexico now, and Texas and California and such. And the history of the 19th century in the United States is the history not only of expanding into the Indian territories, but contest with the Spanish, right, or the Mexicans once they get their independence from Spain. And that, to me, would be a better history of, in fact, the United States than we tend to tell when we just, sort of focus on the English expansion. So I'm all for, rethinking the complexity with which we tell the history of our country. But, for example, Mike Jones and I did a video that's on Unauthorized about St. Louis, right? And another element of the history of the country that's totally left out is why is the city, my birthplace, right, St. Louis, named after a French king? Right? We don't have the stories of the French, and Dr. Jones would say the Jesuits, Illinois, the reason it's named after, named in French after an Indian tribe, right? And that Marquette was here founding missions long before the English show up. So I'm all for better telling of American history, but I think both the critical race theory version and the triumphalist Yankee version are a bit inadequate.
Our last topic. Medieval ages, the lies, the truth the myths about medieval ages. I mean, here in Slovenia, although Slovenia is historically was supposed to be a Catholic country, and was for 50 years a communist country, the majority of people still think of medieval ages as being dark ages. This is something as obvious to an average Slovene as it is that our flag has a white color in it, for example. How much of it is true and how much of it is basically a lie, and if it is a lie, who started the lie and why?
Well, I don't know specifically about Slovenia, but the lie is the Enlightenment. It's the anti-clericalism, particularly philosophers like Voltaire, who were dedicated to destroying Catholicism. Again, 1588, right? It's the Protestants and the Anglican tradition, therefore the English tradition, which says you and I are even speaking in English, right? The English tradition is very anti-Catholic from the 16th century, and it becomes difficult to appreciate the kinds of complexities that I just gave you the example of for American history, right? Certainly there were tensions and difficulties in the Middle Ages, but if most of the things that the Enlightenment criticizes the Middle Ages for were either fantasies like prima nocte, right, that the lords all got to rape the serfs before the wives could be with their husbands. That's a total 19th century myth. Things like some of the torture devices that you imagine from the Middle Ages are, again, they're inventions of the Enlightenment to make themselves feel better about who they are. It's the Enlightenment is like the critical race theory of the 18th century in the sense that it's fantasizing a diabolical past that it's differentiating itself from, and therefore creating all sorts of mythology about it. And so it's fundamentally just anti-Catholic, but it's also a reflection of the kinds of debates that were going on around the French Revolution, or caused by the Industrial Revolution. Modernity trying to make itself out to be the good guys.
This is something that's really interesting about Enlightenment and some right-wing, mainstream right-wing or centrist intellectuals in the West, like Jordan B. Peterson, for example. He's really pro-Enlightenment guy, and for example, our mainstream right-wing is also really pro-Enlightenment. And probably Republicans in America also cherish the Enlightenment also. But for example, the Republicans are pro-Christianity. Our mainstream right wing is pro-Christianity, and JBP is not hostile towards Christianity yet. They all buy this Enlightenment bullshit and.
Yeah,
and don't even start doubting in it. Why would you say? What's the reason for it? IQ,
historical ignorance. No, I mean the Enlightenment was very good at its own propaganda. Just think, it's like, why do we call it the Enlightenment? Although that's a 19th century term for the period. Every historical period has its. Okay, so you asked me about like Christians being normal and do we ever fit? We're always a little bit outside of the world, right? Because we're at odds with the secular, but there are good things that came out of the Enlightenment and good, I'm thinking of the encyclopedia or something like that. Another sort of hubristic desire to contain all knowledge. The claims about being, all men are created equal, or rights of man and things like that. They're deep histories that go back to medieval discussions what those terms actually mean. Most of the time, I think the problems that we face are Christian heresies, in the sense that, okay, this may be the most controversial thing I say. All truth is in Christ. And therefore, if you're going to have any kind of argument, you're going to have to be participating somehow in that truth. So the things that we're wrestling with are typically distortions of that truth, so that it's sort of complicated when you say, well, we talk about all men are created equal. Well, yes, all men are created in the image and likeness of God. We all, in some way, reflect our maker, but we don't all reflect our maker in the same way or have all the same strengths and abilities. And we are all called to fulfill a particular part of God's plan. And so we're not going to be identical, right? Or that, we are all called to, be makers, and therefore human industry should be a good thing. Tolkien is good at this, right? It's like the hobbits and the elves and the men can make good things, but making itself can also become a diabolical activity. So Saruman's, trying to make armies and machines and so forth. That insofar as we exist, and this is the Augustinian version, right? Insofar as we exist, we are good, right? But insofar as we fall away from God's will and distort it, we're not, and therefore there's no the sort of simple division of the good from the evil. Well, we're going to leave that to Christ. He comes to judge us. Right?
Awesome.
I mean, that's why he's the judge. He's the only one who's going to be able to tell the difference. The rest of us are not so good at it.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense to us, but I wonder what Jordan B. Peterson would say to that. I don't know. It depends on what you mean by Christ.
Yes. We pray for him. He's clearly been in a bad way the last few years. Yeah,
we do. What does Dr. Brown think of Marshall Mcluhan, more specifically through the lens of neo-medievalism, if you're familiar with the topic?
Well, I've had some talks with people that are very interested in Mcluhan's ideas. I mean, the strongest one is that, yes, we're living through, and even our conversations here on live stream videos are part of it, that the means of communication that we're engaging in shape the kinds of culture that we can have. But I'm very big on the study of the trivium, which Mcluhan was good on, right? It's like we need the language arts, structure, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. We really need to return to an educational curriculum that takes training in language seriously, to counter some of the perverted uses of things like rhetoric, for example, right? Owen Benjamin talks a lot about the way the spells work and the magicians, trapping us in their advertising speak. It's like, well, if you were, better aware of the techniques that you can use rhetorically, we'd be able to counter that stuff too, right? With arguments that were persuasive for the truth. But yeah, so I think there's sort of general truth in the observations that Mcluhan made.
Another somehow tough question, in the sense that we have to unravel the meanings of the words used. What, in your opinion, is better, ultra-realist Christian Neo-Platonism or moderate realist Thomism?
I'm not even sure what those mean. Medieval.
Yeah,
that's I'd say what I try to teach people to understand is the reading the scriptures in a liturgical context of prayer and devotion, which is a long monastic tradition of sort of training yourself in virtue. Most of the time I get these sounds like it's Neoplatonism or Thomism. It's like you're arguing. One, I think it's ladies, forgive me, it's a more male game, right? Theology is it's the kind of, sort of sorting out problems that I see men really enjoy, and most women just don't go there. There's not very many great women theologians, or any, if I can think of. So possibly I just don't have access to the thing that you guys care about so much.
But why aren't we equal?
I'm going to do stories and poetry and Christian imagination, and so you guys can argue the details of the Trinity.
I know the cities need Catholics, but with the coming hyperinflation and racial conflict, Catholic persecution, can we trust God to protect instead of fleeing to the countryside?
Why wouldn't you? I mean, the only one we can trust is God, right? And the problem is being one, willing to notice when the opportunity is being given to you to take it, however it comes, right? And E. Michael Jones has talked beautifully about this, right? God has a plan for your life, and seeing where that plan is taking you is very, very important. Remember that, within Christianity is quite literally an urban religion, right? It's founded in Jerusalem. And the promise in the long run is of the heavenly city coming down as a bride for the Lamb. So we are meant to have cities as well as the countryside. As a medievalist, what I can warn you of is the countryside is no protection if you're not in a castle and have good fortifications, because once you're out there growing your crops and nobody else has any food, guess who's going to come for them? So we really need to pray and strengthen ourselves in our faith, and then learn what God needs us to be doing wherever we are. It's not the city versus countryside is not you can't just choose one or the other. We are living in this life, and we're going to have to figure out how to be in both.
Dr. Fulton Brown, I promised you we weren't going to be longer than an hour. I'm keeping my promise to you.
If there's any last desperate questions that they definitely want me to answer, I see we've not answered everything for you guys.
Let me see. You cannot answer the question of whether all Slovene women look like Melania Trump.
I claim ignorance. I have no basis of a comparison there.
I see they had their own little debates down there.
That's fine. They seem to be solving some of the problems themselves.
What will be your next book?
Well, I'm working on some little practice things right now, and my Telegram poetry group has published a book just recently called Centrism Games, which you can buy on all good publishers and Amazon. That is a satirical poem written in the style of Alexander Pope, with plot taken from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a satire on the worship of fame. That project is that, and then the second project. That project was a practice in learning with the sort of iambic pentameter. The next thing that we're working on is a children's story that is a quest for a Grail quest that includes bears, seals, penguins, and a griffin, which is meant to help sort of illustrate the theological mystery of faith and the Trinity eventually. And that in the long term is feeding into a translation project that I have of a medieval text that's educational poem, teaching poetry, but talking about the Virgin Mary. It's way too complicated to explain. I'm kind of in a transition period because I'm needing to develop these poetry skills to be able to write the next things that I want to do. And I'm not quite sure yet where that's going to take me, right? But right now we're working on the bear poem.
Well, it's not going to take you to rap, is it?
Unlikely. No, we're working. The bear poem is written in a tova rima, which is the same stanza form as Ariosto used for Orlando Furioso, which is a great 16th century sort of fantasy poem that includes a trip to the moon to get Roland's wits back. I mean, who knows? We could end up just keep continuing the Bear saga and writing longer poems, that I'm really enjoying it. And it's in the mode of, how do you tell stories with the symbolism that Tolkien and Lewis were really, interested in, that helps people see the mystery of Christianity from within the story. And we have an artist that's working on it with the Bear poem, and it's incredibly satisfying. So who knows? I might keep writing poems for a while. And in my teaching, I'm also going there, sort of talking about the necessity of understanding. Well, the grammar, rhetoric, and logic is part of it, but poetry and it's these formal verbal forms are the root of civilization. You think the oldest literature that we have in the West, right? Things like Homer and even in the Old Testament, the Psalms, right? The root of our culture is in our poetry, and we've lost anything in the modernity, it's poetry. We need to recover our ability to think in beautiful, well-structured words.
You'd be a great match with my friend. I'm more of a, although I'm myself, I'm a Catholic, but I have a more secular channel. But my friend has a first traditional Catholic channel in Slovenia called Skutum Fidei. Would you be prepared to come to his channel too?
That would be fun. Yes.
Okay, great. I will certainly connect you, because he's a poet too, and that's why I remembered him.
See, there's more poetry out there. It's a thing, right? It's growing. We're going to have gorgeous, joyous Christian poetry.
Great. So, any final thoughts? I have a final question for you. What is the name of Professor Tolkien channel? Is it Tolkien?
No, it's the platform is unauthorized.tv, and that's the same platform where Owen Benjamin and Vox Day and Stefan Molyneux and Wrangler Star and Razorfist and me and some others. We're also posting like audiobooks from Castelia House and things like that. My channel on unauthorized.tv is The Forge of Tolkien. And if you subscribe to my channel, my Tolkien, you get the full platform, so you'll get all of the other videos too.
Okay, let's all do that. Any final thoughts?
Yes, and you can get Centrism Games, a modern Dunciad, for sale now.
Yeah, it would be great. I'd be glad, and I'm sure that my viewers would also be glad.
I'd say don't if you go to the Wikipedia page that he started with, look for the external links that take you to my academic homepage, which gives you links to everything else that I actually. Yeah,
and where are the external links?
I think they're at the bottom of the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, external links are at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, go there, and you'll see. I mean, my book on Milo, my books on Mary, the poetry. Reading list for all of my classes, and all those little buildings, right? There's those little Ankerstein buildings, which is sort of my meditation practice, right? It's like building these little models as a symbol of, the need. What we're fighting is the forces of destruction, right? The demonic forces that want to tear down everything that we make. And anything that you do, you need to be practicing building, right? Fundamentally, that's what we need to do, build.
She's so gracefully beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
With this beautiful thought, we shall finish our live stream. Thank you, Dr. Brown. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
I hope I can invite you some other time again. I will try to connect you, if it's not against your will, with my friend at Skutum Fidei, so you can make a conversation too. Thank you once again, and thank you to all the viewers and for all the comments and for your gracefulness, because you're not always graceful.
I'm glad they behaved.
Yeah, they did. Because you're so gracefully beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Brown, and good evening in Slovenia and good afternoon in America, probably, and goodbye.